What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the show. I'm excited to be here. As always, I'm your host, Bob McIntosh. And on today's show, we have a good friend of mine, John Blackburn. Now, I won't tell all of John's dirty secrets, even though I've known him for years. But the one thing that I'm excited about this conversation, for a couple of reasons. One, as we are watching this market shift right under our feet, very quickly, actually, I'd say, especially for real estate. I mean, still not like day to day necessarily, but still very quickly in comparison to what we've seen in many other aspects of real estate. I've also known John to have an immense amount of knowledge about the space, right? He holds, particularly in the, I'll say, long-term rental and other apartments and doing, BRRRR strategy and things of that nature, which we'll get into if you don't know. Uh, he's a wealth of information. So I'm excited for him to be on to share what it is. It's been a hot minute since we've gotten to have a longer conversation of this nature. So John, thanks for being on, buddy. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you having me. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. So, I imagine at least a bunch of people who are watching this, if you're in the Facebook group, and by the way, if you're not in the Facebook group, you should be joining if you're listening to this later on. But for anyone who doesn't know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background, what you do, and how you got to where you're at right now?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I've been a real estate investor, I think, for 17 or 18 years at this point in time. It's hard to keep track. I kept saying like 14 years, 14 years. And then one day I had to do the math. I was like, well, been 17. So, my claim to fame is to be able to deal with all that stress for 17 years and still keep all my hair. So it hasn't been too bad.
There you go.
My main focus, I've done a lot of, the retail flips and wholesaling and what you think traditionally of real estate investment, at least the active side. So I've done a lot of that. My biggest driving focus and desire has always been to invest in long-term buy and hold rental properties. So I think I've bought and sold over about 2,500 rental properties in
Dang.
that time frame. So yeah, it's been awesome. It's been a ride, and I couldn't be more excited about what's happening in the marketplace because for me this is just everything's going on sale. So I'm super excited
Right.
about that. And yeah, I mean, that's just my focus right now. The next 5 years, my goal is to add about another 200 units to my overall portfolio, just because I think the available inventory is going to be there. So got to strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah. And I think that that's an interesting thing. So I want to point out something. So 17 years, which means like myself, you kind of went through the last round of crazy real estate downturn, which we haven't seen
Yeah.
for a hot minute, right? But
Yeah.
I feel like if you could survive the freak out and go, okay, wait, there's opportunity here, and go. And it was interesting. I was on a call not too long ago, and there was a bunch of I call them newbie investors, right? Most of them were, I'll say, sub 6-7 years of doing this.
Hmm.
And this is not to, I'm not downplaying their experience of 6-7 years, but they've only operated in good markets, right? Like
Yep.
they've never gone through that down. And it's funny because, and I want to highlight this for all of you listening or watching this. He said there's a lot of opportunity to buy things at a discount. And I think that's super important. Everyone's freaking out about pricing or interest rates or this or that or whatever, right? But the reality is there's going to be an insane opportunity to buy stuff. And I'm excited too. I always want to frame that because I'm excited for the opportunity. There's a lot of people that are going to be hurt, right? There's going to be a lot of pain for a lot of folks in this, which is, I'm not excited about that part, right? Because I never want to see people hurt. But at the same time, I know so much more now, and like you, and I'm excited for what that means. So, uh, what specifically for you is really exciting you about this opportunity that's coming up, and why so?
Yeah, and just to kind of touch on one thing you just had mentioned, when I started real estate, I think it was 2007, going into 2008, right? So like it started, I was like a flash in a pan, right? I was hot real quick, selling deal, and I was a retail real estate agent, so I was just slinging deals left and right. I mean, if you could fog a mirror, you could sell real estate back then.
Like,
And then exactly,
approved.
got it, got it, right? And it got to a point where the market just fell apart, and it was I don't know if many of you guys know this, but like literally, I had friends who were in the banking industry that would like have went home on Friday and went to the office that following Monday, and the bank was closed, right? Like no phone call, no email, it's just gone forever
Just
and never to
Renzo.
return. Yeah. And, I remember when I watched this market fall apart, and I wasn't in the play. I was young, I was 20 years old. I didn't know what was going on. I just thought I was, the hottest shit in the world, and realized that that was not the case. You actually had to be intelligent to do this job. And, I remember going through 2008, 9, 10, and thinking to myself, I go, man, the next time this happens, I'm going to be ready. And I'm going to talk myself off the sideline, because all of this propaganda of all the sky is falling, right?
Right.
It's all going to come back. And that was, I think that I carry that into today with the confidence that knows, like, yeah, this is just, it's cyclical, right? It's going to come down, it's going to go back up. And there are a lot of people out there who will become millionaires through this market transition, and there will be some people that get hurt. One thing that I've always focused on is, my main driver is to buy rental properties, right? And one thing that happens in a recession is rents increase, because the demand for rent increases. And just as you and your dad and stuff have invested over the years, you take the worst home in the nicest neighborhood, turn it around and sell it to a family who's in need of that home, right? You're brightening up those neighborhoods. It's the same situation here, right? We're creating a place for someone to live in a time where it's hard to find a good quality place to live in an economy
100%.
that might not be the sexiest thing in the world, right? So, as much as people are getting hurt, we can do as much as we can to add value to those people during those time of need, for sure.
Yeah. So let's actually talk about that a little bit.
Hmm.
Rents increasing during recessions.
Hmm.
So the counterpoint that I often hear, and I would love to hear your take on this, is, well, sure, rents increase during recessions, but if they don't have any money, they can't pay rent, so you're going to end up screwed anyways. So
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
Yeah. So, first off, it's just a supply and demand curve, right? People's wages usually stagnate or decrease. They're in a position where interest rates are higher. So the affordability of housing to buy a home is lower. And people just overall, because of fear, are holding on to more cash. So they're unwilling to go out and buy a bigger house or nicer house or the first house or something like that. So their desire to rent is higher. And I think a lot of people immediately think recession, job loss, recession, job loss.
Right.
Like it's like this synonymous thing, when it's not. It's recession because of higher interest rates, recession because of people are scared to invest, recession because, just because there's a recession, yeah, the amount of people who are struggling to find employment is certainly higher, but that's not diminishing those people who are wanting to rent, who are qualified and able to rent, right? And you
Absolutely.
know, as an investor, you also need to pay attention to the demographic that you're targeting with your rentals, right? If you're buying in the urban core, where traditionally people are very transient in terms of their jobs, that's only going to get worse in a time of recession, right? If you're focusing more on, you know, uh, higher blue collar, maybe lower white collar areas, then those areas aren't nearly as affected with the recession. It's just they're unwilling to spend more money to buy a house. They're unwilling to pay a higher interest rate, so they just rent longer. That's the difference.
And that's awesome. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's something for everyone else to take away too. Understanding, hey, like there are different kinds of recessions. And something that you talked about is like, hey, interest rate recession. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Mhm.
One of my favorite things I literally just saw on I think it was an advertisement for Pace Morby's course or whatever. He's like some guy's like, it's a terrible time to buy houses. The
Yeah,
interest rates are this or whatever. And I was like, oh man, like I love when people say that, because I'm like, okay, cool.
yeah.
I like so let's talk a little bit about that. So how are interest rates affecting, especially in the rental game, what we're doing as investors?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like interest rates, when they increase, especially from a rental standpoint, it's going to, in the immediate, it's going to decrease your cash flow, right? Because you're paying more for the money you borrowed on that house, right? And that
Hmm.
comes out of your pocket because the renter's having to pay that, right? You know, two things, two things beside death and taxes are true in real estate, and that is one, the the following reaction to higher interest rates is the housing market slows, properties drop, property prices decrease, right? So,
Makes sense.
for a second, prices were up here and interest rates just kept rising. Then all of a sudden, they both start to move, right? Interest rates go up, prices move down, and the spread's no different than what it was when interest rates were 3%, because now you're paying $100,000 less for that house, right? So,
Right.
the opportunity cost up front, in the first 6 or 12 months, yes, you're still um, not having as much cash flow. But guess what will also happen, guys? Interest rates will go down. So what do? In 3 years, you just refinance the house, right? It's not rocket science in that sense. So you either allow property prices to come in alignment with the higher interest rates to receive the same cash flow, or buy a house and plan on refinancing it in 5 years, right? When interest rates do come down, right? So the best time to buy a piece of real estate was yesterday. And I don't care if it was in 2007, 2010, or 2022, that was the best time to buy a piece of real estate.
And I think that's such an important point, right? Is understanding, and I want to focus on something you said, the spread, right? We get focused on one singular data point. Oh,
Yeah.
interest rates are high, but we forget that there's a bounds to that. It's caused a reciprocal, or
Yep.
not a reciprocal, but I guess maybe that would be it, a reciprocal reaction, which is prices coming down, and
Hmm.
understanding how that works. So, um, one of the things that you said was, you were trying to add an additional 200 units to your portfolio. How are you doing that, right? Because most people are going to go, I can't get 200 loans, or what's the
Hmm.
process that you're going through to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a process, right? And
We love
I,
processes in real estate.
yeah, I think with newer investors, right, people don't know what they don't know, right? And they think I can't get 200 loans, or I can never come up with those down payments, or so on and so forth. And the reality is, actually, yes, you can. It just, it's a learning process that you go through over time to realize that, right? Like, when you're first starting out, you're like, okay, I can do 5 properties, right? And then once you hit 30, you're like, maybe I can do 200, right? So for me, the main kind of strategy that I use to buy rental properties is the BRRRR investing strategy, which you had brought up earlier in the call. Is and that stands for buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat, right? So we're buying a value add asset, right? One that needs some work. We're doing that renovation, and then through that renovation we've increased the equity in the home. So the ultimate goal is, when we get to that refinance piece, right, we have enough equity in the home that we can pull out all of our initial cash that we've put
Right.
in. And yes, we had to have cash to put in. That's where we use hard money or private money, right? Again, not using any of our own capital. And then normally the best way to kind of just keep this process rolling on the refinance side, it's just creating a relationship with a local lender, right? That understands the market, that wants to see good things happen in their city, and they feel confident in the areas you're investing in, and they're willing to extend you credit because they know what you're doing. They see what you're doing. They understand the logistics and the numbers behind it.
Okay, so and I love this methodology. And by the way, for those of you who are maybe hearing this for the first time, possibly, this strategy works really well, and I will 100% attest to it, because we currently, between my dad and I, own somewhere around, it's like about $1.7 million in property that I've had to put a total into of $20,000. And the only reason I put 20,000 into owning all of that was because those were our first two properties, and we had no idea that you could even do this other way around it.
Yeah.
But we just finished a refinance as part of the BRRRR, and pulled out 40,000. So technically, I own 1.7 million of real estate with no money out of pocket, and actually having been paid to buy real estate, which is a crazy way. So it works. It absolutely works. But I want to talk about a couple of things, because through our process, we've had some struggles in these things, and I'm sure other people do. So let's
Yeah.
start with lending relationships. How
Hmm.
and where do you build lending relationships? And particularly for those of us who maybe live in more appreciation markets like a San Diego, LA, or Miami, or New York City, or
Yep.
areas where we wouldn't want to be buying in, and we're trying to buy in, let's say, the Midwest. I know you had said before the call, you're in Arkansas, Ohio. We hear Texas and Florida to a certain extent. Like, we hear all those things, but how do I create those relationships when I don't live there?
Yeah, so when you're doing the BRRRR strategy, you want to think about having two different types of lending relationships. One is the purchase and renovation money, and then the long-term finance money, right? The refinance money. So, on the purchase and renovation money, right? That can come from anywhere, right? That's where we want to go out and raise private money. And that person can be in another country. They don't have to be in the same state that you're investing in. That all that is a relationship where you're offering them an opportunity to earn 10 or 12% back on, money that's backed and insured through real estate, maybe personally guaranteed, however you want to write up the contract. So that's number one. That doesn't really have to be local. And then on the refinance side of things, what I did, I actually hired a virtual assistant in the Philippines, and I had them scour the entire state of Arkansas. Basically, I had them go on to every single bank, local bank. So, like, no Chase, no US Bank, no Wells Fargo, no Bank of America, just local banks, like hometown banks. Find every single one of them in Arkansas they could find, go to their commercial lending site, figure out who the head of their commercial lending was, and put in their email and their phone number. And I think I wound up with like 70 or 80. And I just went down the
Wow.
line, boom, 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 until I figured out who could play the game that I was playing, right? And who was excited about doing it with me. And that was the opportunity that came to fruition.
That's awesome. I'm a little jealous. I never thought about doing that before.
There you go.
No, that's perfect. So, okay, so you get this list of small, hometown banks,
Yep.
and you start building a relationship, figure out who's playing your game, and now, are you buying properties in areas that these lenders are in, or that meet that, or are you still buying in the area that you determined, and you're just trying to get a lender to plug into the area that you're in?
Yeah, I want to buy where I want to buy, right? I don't
Okay,
like it when people kind of put me in their box. I want to fit them in mine, right? So that's the goal. And realistically, for most, I mean, I do invest in those blue collar to white collar areas, right? I'm not, investing in the urban core or anything like that. So for me, most of the time, I'm in alignment with what the bank is wanting in terms of their
right.
risk portfolio. Yeah.
No, I think that's huge. And then do you ever worry about, or have you run into an issue with your refinancing lender that they go, you got a lot with us right now. We don't want to take on more. And you need to form new relationships, or, do they actually get excited about more because you're adding value, and obviously they're making the interest rate spread?
Yeah, it really depends on the bank, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I've had a couple banks that'll put like a 1.5 to 2 million cap, meaning that's like the debt load I can carry with them. So they're like, they're like, that can equal one property or it equal 100 properties, right? But $2 million is your cap. When we're there, we're done, right? And
Right.
I always revisit with them time to time, right? Because banks change their mind whenever they lend out $2 million and all of it's performing and all of it's doing so well, and they're like, "Oh, that kind of worked out better than I thought." Then they're like, "Man, we'll give you another $1 million," something like that. And then
Right.
there's other banks that are just like, just with an appetite. One thing that you guys will find out is like really small hometown banks. What they'll do is they'll offer a deposit program for the people in their hometowns, and the deposit program is like CDs and stuff like that, where they're giving a little bit better rate than like a larger bank would or something like that. They set up very specific college saving plan for the people in their hometown and their demographics. And what happens with these hometown banks, guys, is they wind up having too much money. Like literally, they're like they'll stop taking deposits, they'll stop their programs because they can't lend it out fast enough. I know you think that's
Hmm.
crazy, but it is. So, for those smaller hometown banks, and they have one or two branches that are really out there in the community trying to develop their relationship, they're the ones with the cash, and they write their own lending guidelines, right? They're not following Fannie or Freddie Mac or anything like that. They're like, hey, we can put together whatever you need. So those creating those relationships is severely needed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know, as a person who worked in banking previously, specifically on the audit and security side of hacking them and breaking their stuff and
Yeah.
fixing it. I can attest to the same thing. It's always interesting. You'll find the small, like you said, the small one, two, maybe three branch banks are, they have different rules for things. And my experience too has also always been, they're usually run by someone who's been in the community for a long time, believes in the community, and specifically wants to, I don't know if this is give back, but they want to see that money reinvested in their community to help it continue to grow. And so
Yep.
they will often take on a different risk profile for properties just because they understand the market a whole lot better.
Yeah.
Have you seen the same thing in your experience?
Oh, 100%. And they're what I like about them is once the relationship's there, once you've done 5 or 10 deals with them, everybody just stops asking questions, right? And it just kind of it's just that much smoother of a process for you to get things done.
Nice, nice. So now let's go to the other side of this, right? Because this all sounds great, but I know, for example, that you live in San Diego, but you're buying
Yeah.
property, as you said, in Arkansas. How are
Yep.
you going about identifying, finding, ensuring that it's not, you're not getting ripped off or taken advantage of? Like, tell me more about how that works especially from a remote location.
Yeah, I mean, I live in San Diego. I don't invest in San Diego. My closest rental property is literally 2,000 miles away. So, what you can do outside of, your hometown, if your hometown isn't conducive to rental properties, is, I created an evaluation system, right? It's basically I look at 6 data points across a statewide and then city specific, right? And I look to see if that area, that state, that city meets those data points. And if it does, then I have a green light for investing in that market. And then from there, once we're at the city level, we have the green light, then we go to the neighborhood level, right? And there's a lot of resources like neighborhood scouts and city data that really kind of paint the picture of like what zip code and what neighborhood has to offer in terms of housing price points, demographics, employment, median income, all of these different things, right? So then we start narrowing it down to the neighborhood. Then one thing that you asked was, how do we make sure we're not getting ripped off, right? How do we inspect what we expect, right? A kind of
Absolutely.
phrase I always like to use. And the way that we do that is just hire an independent third party, right? The best one to use
Mm,
is a independent property inspector.
okay.
I have multiple in every market that I invest in, and I'll put a property under contract, but I will never buy a property without them looking at it first, and that's going to allow me to make a determination if what I'm getting into is good or not good. And you guys want a really cool thing I literally just learned about like 48 hours ago?
Definitely. Let's hear it.
Yeah,
New
so
stuff.
it's
Give
this.
me, give me.
It's a new San Diego company. It's called Quick Fix. QWIK, quickfix.com. So one of my teammates figured this out, so I'm giving her all the credit. This is the coolest thing ever. So you do a property inspection, right? So let's say you've never seen this house, right? Property inspector does a great job, great notes, great pictures. All you do is literally upload this property inspection to quickfix.com. You
Hmm.
get assigned a individual, and based on where this property is, where in the market, what all the notes were, they build out a scope of work and pricing to fix everything for you in that market, and they'll give you contractors, and if you want, they'll manage the project for you.
Wow,
Yeah, I
that's
about fell
awesome.
out of my yeah. I was like, get out of here, right? So yeah, we're beta testing it as we speak right now.
That's amazing. I mean, I could totally see that. Like, yeah, I would 100% do that all the time. And like,
Yep.
even for us, right? Like, I have, all of our properties are in Buffalo, New York, and I know the market inside and out. But my parents just left there, not right. So
Yep.
now I'm at the same point. Like, okay, well, I don't necessarily want to stop buying there just because we found that it's a great cash flow market, and I know enough to know where
Yeah.
to not risk it. But yeah, it's like, okay, well, how do I have someone that can do these things and really be a boots in the ground, since I don't have that anymore. So I think that's huge. Wow.
Yep. Yeah. It's a super cool thing. But yeah, I mean that's having that inspector is there to watch your back, and just get an inspection done on everything you do, especially if it's outside of your backyard. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there was a few data points for like markets. Would you share a
Mhm.
couple of those with us?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing I'm doing at the state level is I want to see, are they investor friendly or are they resident friendly? right? Now you and I both invest in what we would consider resident friendly states, right? So it doesn't mean that we can't do it. I have houses in Connecticut, you own houses in New York, right?
Right.
Perpetually very renter friendly states. So it can still be done and done very successfully. But at the top line, you'd always want to invest in an investor friendly state where the laws are on your side, not on the resident side. And
And
then at the
I do
state,
I want to just chime in real quick for that, for anyone who doesn't know about why. Like, obviously I'm from Buffalo, my parents were in Buffalo, and we started buying rentals before knowing any of this stuff, right? Like, so
yeah,
I didn't know any better than that, to go out there and find things in the places. Now that we know better, we're looking in other places too. But yeah, our cash flow often compensates, the insane cash
yeah.
flow compensates for the risk that we have in that state. But keep going.
Yeah, and then at the state level, right, we're looking at GMP, which is gross metro product. It's just the fancy term for GDP of a city. So we want to see, is the city growing from a financial standpoint, right? Is it continuing to produce more and more? Are there more and more jobs being added? We're looking at what's called HAI, or Housing Affordability Index, right? How affordable is it for someone based on the median income of that city? How affordable is it for someone to live there, pay rent, all of those different factors? We're looking at socioeconomic anchors, which is a fancy term for who are the big job suppliers, right? And going into a recession right now, right? This is this plays such a big part, because you can't completely recession proof a business, but you can come pretty close, right?
Right.
An example I always like to use is Las Vegas versus Memphis, Tennessee. Now, Las Vegas is getting better, right? They're adding
Right.
all these sports teams and stuff like that. But for the majority of it, it's all tourism, right?
Right.
People go to Las Vegas to spend the extra cash that they have, drink, and have fun, right? And when they don't have any extra cash, guess what? They don't go to Las Vegas, right? But you look at Tennessee or Memphis specifically, right? They have the largest transportation airport in the world, right? They have FedEx World Headquarters, Nike distribution plant, military distribution plant, right? It's endless, right? So from a transportation standpoint, which I don't see Amazon slowing down anytime soon.
Right.
You're going to constantly see jobs and job growth in that city. So those are the things we're looking for.
And I think that's so important. I remember that there was back in my marketing class in college. There was this. I don't know why this particular story always stuck with me, but we were talking about recessions and economic up and downs and things like that. And he said, one of the most resilient businesses that grows during a recession that you would never think,
What?
Heinz.
Really?
Yeah, because Heinz primary products are ketchup and mustard. And when money is tight, people buy cheaper cuts of meat, which means they put more condiments on it to mask the
Wow.
flavor, the lesser
That
flavor of good stuff. And I was like, that's like it makes total sense, right?
total
And
sense.
in the context of real estate, obviously Heinz has nothing to do with real estate. But
Yeah.
the reason that I brought that up is, I think your point is brilliant, right? We got to understand, in all times, in good times and bad times, does the industry have staying power, sticky power? Is it going to be able to survive through there, or are we going to see things happen, right? Like, if you're in an area that doesn't have that, it becomes concerning long term. And going back to your earlier point where we talked about, hey, like, aren't people going to lose jobs and whatever? Not necessarily, right? They
Yeah.
just might not spend as much money, but they still have to have a place to live. They still have to have a roof over their head. It's a basic human need. And so we get to be the people that can provide that for folks, as long as we understand what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah, 100%. I always like, the game of investing, right, is all based on perspective, right? And I'm sure you've heard of him. I don't know if anyone else has, but Ray Dalio, he wrote a book called Principles, and Ray Dalio is known
Love
as the
that book.
most successful investor on the face of the planet, right? He has beaten the stock market year over year for like 40 years. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he did it was, he just, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, he just got wrecked, right? Like, lost everything. And he
Yep.
was like, I can't believe that this is the first time it ever happened. Like, I can't believe, like, this set of things that occurred was the first time it happened in history. And he realized that just because it didn't happen in his lifetime doesn't mean it didn't happen. So what he did was he took all the trades ever done in the United States stock market. Had people put it into a computer and turn it into an algorithm, and basically just from what has happened in the past, he's able to read the future based on a couple markers. And I think perspective being what it is, you look back at 2007, and everyone in 2010 were really pissed they bought a house in 2006, right?
Right.
Everyone in 2022 is pissed they didn't buy a house in 2006, right? What we perceived as the highest market it could ever get to was just blown away in the last 3 years, right? And it's so fun to
Hmm.
think about.
No, it's absolutely true, and I think it was interesting. I was actually on a call with him, not one on one, but he was like a group call, and he was talking about that same idea. Over a period of time, we can see a whole lot of things, and there's always industries, niches, markets that will go up. Almost everything will over time. Some, not everything will make it, but real estate, he was talking about specifically, is one of
Yeah.
those that is not exactly recession proof, but as about as close as it can possibly get, especially when it comes to the rental side of things. So I think that's huge. Awesome. Well, John, dude, I'm sure we could probably talk for another 10 hours if we really wanted to about this stuff. We both geek out, but I appreciate you taking the time to be on. If folks want to know more about you or where to find you, where can they connect with you or drop in and see more what you got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very similarly to you, I run a free Facebook group. It's called Rental Property Pro
Imagine that.
Master. Yeah, I know. Rental Property Pro Master Burr Investing. Come join, check it out, guys. I do a lot of value add posts on a weekly basis. I do a weekly live at Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I answer questions. I always train on a different topic, and a lot of good, awesome free information. I mean, going back to what I had talked about previously is, when I had that conversation with myself a decade ago, like the next time this happens, I'm going to be ready. And that's what I'm working towards. And the reason why I started the group, you know, 3, 4 months ago was for that fact, right? Like other people should be ready for this, whether you know it or not. And, get rid of this scared mindset. It's called a buyer's market for a reason, right? You should be
Right.
buying houses. So
I
let's
know.
let's
I
get you
know.
focused on that.
It was funny. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, if I knew what I knew now in 2010, when I first got to Los Angeles, and I did a bunch of houses out there. If I had simply held on to, which I take for what you will, but if I'd held on to that real estate that I bought, I literally would have made in 10 years approximately $15 million. I just looked up the valuations, and I was like, huh, huh,
Yeah.
what? And so, I just want to reiterate, right? We are entering a time that will likely be an amazing opportunity that only comes once a decade, maybe once every couple decades, depending on where, certain things. But I'm excited for it. And, if you want to learn more about building that strategy and being able to do it again with very little money out of your own pocket, definitely go check out John's group. I am in it myself and can attest to the content that I've seen him put out so far.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. And yeah, I probably moved to San Diego around the same time you moved to LA. And I remember there's this condo, like a high-rise condo complex by the beach in PB. And it's the only one, I don't know how it got grandfathered in, but it's this monstrosity, right? And I remember at like the bottom of the market, which we know where the bottom of the market is now 10 years later, condos there were selling would range anywhere from about 70 to $270,000. And I remember thinking about that, like even the 270 ones, I was like, oh man, that's kind of expensive, right? It's like a 2 bedroom, 2 bath, like 900 square feet or something like that. They're selling today for $1 million. Like, can you imagine you just bought 10 $70,000 condos?
Right.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy, but awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being on. Truly appreciate it. For all of you listening, watching, joining us, there's only one thing that I ask. If you enjoyed this, you learned something, share it with a friend. Invite a friend to our group. Check it out. Because at the end of the day, this is all great information, but it just only actually gets to people and helps them if we get out there, which I need your support doing. So simple payment, invite a friend or two along to this podcast and or show, depending on where you're watching or listening. And of course, I appreciate your time. This is the most valuable thing that you can give to both John and myself. And so I acknowledge you for spending the time to listen in and check in. We'll see you guys on another show real soon. We do every single week, Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll see you there. John, thank you again for being on. Truly appreciate your knowledge and information.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you. Thank you very much for having me. It's been fun.
Absolutely. See you guys soon. Bye.
This podcast is sponsored by 3 Degrees Consulting. If you need funnels, websites, paid ads management, or help with any of your digital marketing, 3 Degrees Consulting is your go-to source for everything. Check them out at www.go3dc.com. That's G-O, the number 3, D is in degrees, C is in consulting.com. Go check them out right now.